Episode 2, The Iron Law of Oligarchy, or Why Organizations Become Elites. Michels' findings on Italian socialist parties offer valuable insights because they illustrate how even organizations committed to democratic values and egalitarian principles can still succumb to the iron law, a phenomenon that underscores the importance of understanding power dynamics within these groups. This highlights the need to consider the complexities of organizational behavior, as these parties quickly became dominated by a small group of charismatic leaders who wielded significant influence over party policy and direction, a development that is crucial to understand. This is not to suggest that these leaders were inherently corrupt or power-hungry, rather, they had developed the skills and expertise necessary to navigate the intricacies of party politics. They built networks of supporters and allies within the party, which allowed them to shape the party's goals and values in their own image. In doing so, they reinforced the dominant leadership structure, a pattern consistent with Michels' findings. The implications of Michels' research are far-reaching, with significant consequences for our understanding of organizational dynamics. If even organizations committed to democratic principles can still succumb to the iron law, then what hope is there for more hierarchical or authoritarian institutions? This raises important questions about the limitations of democratic ideals in practice, prompting us to consider alternative approaches. The answer lies not in trying to eliminate power hierarchies altogether, but rather in recognizing the inherent tendency towards oligarchy and designing institutions that can mitigate its effects. One way to achieve this is by building mechanisms for accountability and transparency, which can help counterbalance the natural tendency towards oligarchy. This might involve creating independent oversight bodies, establishing clear rules and procedures for decision-making, or providing opportunities for members to participate in policymaking processes. By doing so, organizations can cultivate a culture of openness and inclusivity that mitigates the effects of oligarchy, thereby creating more democratic, inclusive, and effective institutions. Moreover, these mechanisms can also help prevent power concentration. Another approach is to build a diverse range of leaders with different skills, expertise, and perspectives, which can help prevent any one individual or group from dominating the organization. Instead, this distributed form of leadership can better respond to changing circumstances. By recognizing the inherent tendency towards oligarchy and designing institutions that mitigate its effects, we can create organizations that are more democratic, inclusive, and effective in achieving their goals. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy is not a moral failing or personal characteristic, it's an inherent feature of complex social coordination that requires careful consideration when designing organizational structures. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to acknowledge that this concentration of power is a dynamic process shaped by growth, complexity, and environmental pressures. Michels' own research suggests that even organizations committed to democratic principles can gradually succumb to oligarchic tendencies, underscoring the importance of understanding this process, which has significant implications for organizational dynamics. One striking aspect of this process is how it can lead to a self-reinforcing cycle where those in positions of power become increasingly entrenched and difficult to dislodge. This can create stagnation and resistance to change as the organization focuses on maintaining existing structures rather than adapting to new challenges, ultimately hindering innovation. Conversely, finding a balance between these competing demands is crucial, allowing organizations to navigate complex challenges while remaining true to their founding principles. While oligarchic tendencies can sometimes be necessary in certain contexts, it's also important to recognize that they can lead to stagnation. For instance, during times of crisis or uncertainty, clear leadership or decision-making authority can provide stability and direction, which is essential for navigating difficult circumstances. However, this does not mean the organization is forever doomed. Rather, it requires careful consideration, highlighting the need for a nuanced understanding of power dynamics. In fact, designing institutions that balance effective decision-making with democratic participation and accountability becomes the key question. This requires distributing power more evenly, creating opportunities for diverse perspectives and expertise, and establishing mechanisms for holding leaders accountable and encouraging innovation. By doing so, we can create organizations that are both efficient and inclusive, able to navigate complex challenges while remaining true to their founding principles. As an organization's power structure becomes entrenched, it's natural to wonder whether there's a way to break this cycle of oligarchy. Can we design institutions that foster genuine participation and accountability, rather than simply reinforcing the status quo? Michels himself was skeptical about overcoming the iron law, suggesting that even well-intentioned organizations would eventually succumb to elite dominance, raising important questions about creating more democratic organizations. However, I'd argue that this pessimism is unwarranted. While large-scale coordination poses significant challenges to democratic decision-making, it doesn't necessarily follow that power will always concentrate at the top. In fact, there are many examples of organizations that have successfully navigated these complexities and maintained a commitment to democratic principles, suggesting that overcoming the iron law is not only possible but also necessary for creating more just and equitable societies. One key insight is that effective decision-making doesn't require a single, centralized authority. Instead, we can design institutions that empower diverse groups and individuals to take ownership of specific aspects of the organization's work. This decentralized approach might involve creating structures such as committees or task forces, which allow for more participatory decision-making, thereby mitigating the challenges posed by large-scale coordination. Moreover, this type of structure can foster a sense of shared responsibility, ultimately leading to more effective decision-making and promoting accountability. Another crucial factor is the role of transparency and accountability mechanisms. When leaders are held accountable for their actions and decisions, they're less likely to abuse their power or pursue personal interests at the expense of the organization's goals. This can be achieved through measures such as regular reporting, auditing, and independent oversight bodies, which ensure that power is not concentrated at the top. Transparency also fosters trust among stakeholders, thereby promoting a culture of accountability. Ultimately, the key question becomes how we can design institutions and organizational structures that balance effective decision-making with democratic participation and accountability. To achieve this, we must find ways to distribute power more evenly, create opportunities for diverse perspectives and expertise, establish mechanisms for holding leaders accountable, and encourage innovation. By doing so, we can create organizations that are both efficient and inclusive, able to navigate complex challenges while remaining true to their founding principles. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to acknowledge that this concentration of power is not a moral failing or personal flaw, but rather an inherent feature of large-scale organizations. This complexity and scale require coordination and decision-making on a massive level, underscoring the need to rethink our assumptions about power and organization. Moreover, the tension between efficiency and democracy arises from these complexities, revealing the importance of designing institutions that mitigate the effects of oligarchy. To effectively address the consequences of oligarchy, we must fundamentally rethink our assumptions about power and organization. Rather than viewing power as something held by an individual or a small group, we need to recognize it as a diffuse phenomenon flowing through networks and relationships. This perspective challenges traditional notions of leadership and authority, suggesting that power is not solely the domain of those at the top but rather a complex web of interactions. Instead, we must design institutions and organizational structures that facilitate collective decision-making and empower diverse perspectives. This requires creating spaces for dialogue, deliberation, and experimentation where individuals can bring their unique skills, expertise, and experiences to the table. By doing so, we can create organizations that are more resilient, innovative, and responsive. The key question remains how to balance effective decision-making with democratic participation and accountability. To achieve this, we must find ways to distribute power more evenly, create opportunities for diverse perspectives and expertise, establish mechanisms for holding leaders accountable, and encourage innovation. By doing so, we can create organizations that are both efficient and inclusive, able to navigate complex challenges while remaining true to their founding principles. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder of the inherent tension between democracy and organization. It highlights the need for ongoing dialogue, experimentation, and innovation in creating more just and equitable societies. Furthermore, acknowledging this tension and working to mitigate its effects enables us to build organizations that are truly democratic, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to recognize that power concentration is not a result of individual flaws or biases, but rather an inherent feature of complex social systems. Michels' research on Italian socialist parties provides a striking example of how even organizations committed to democratic principles can fall prey to this phenomenon, despite their egalitarian ideals. This raises important questions about the nature of power and organization, which we must continue to explore to create more just and equitable societies. Can large-scale collective action remain democratic and inclusive, or does an inherent tension between democracy and organization exist that cannot be fully resolved? The iron law of oligarchy suggests that this tension is a fundamental aspect of complex social systems, where coordination and efficiency needs can lead to power concentration in a few individuals. Moreover, this raises concerns about the potential consequences of unchecked power concentration, which highlights the need for alternative solutions. One potential solution lies in decentralized decision-making structures. By distributing power and influence throughout an organization, we can create spaces for diverse perspectives and voices to be heard. This might involve smaller working groups or committees empowered to make decisions independently, rather than relying solely on centralized leadership. In doing so, organizations can foster collaboration, inclusivity, and ultimately more effective decision-making, leading to a stronger sense of community. Another approach involves fostering transparency and accountability within organizations. By making decision-making processes open and accessible, we can increase trust and participation among members, reducing the likelihood of power concentration in a few individuals. This might involve regular reporting and evaluation mechanisms, as well as opportunities for members to provide feedback and input on key decisions. Transparency can also help mitigate the effects of the iron law of oligarchy. In addition, recognizing the inevitability of power concentration can help us develop strategies to mitigate its effects. Furthermore, acknowledging this tension between democracy and organization can encourage innovation and experimentation in creating just and equitable societies. By doing so, we can work to build organizations that are truly democratic, with power distributed widely and decision-making inclusive and participatory. As we delve deeper into Michels' concept of the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to recognize that power concentration isn't driven by nefarious intentions or malicious actions, rather, it's an inevitable consequence of complex social coordination. The more intricate an organization becomes, the greater the need for centralized decision-making and specialized expertise. This doesn't mean abandoning hope of creating truly democratic and inclusive organizations, but rather acknowledging the challenges we face and working to develop effective solutions that balance efficiency with inclusivity. On the contrary, Michels' work suggests that acknowledging the tension between democracy and organization is crucial for building more just and equitable societies. By implementing mechanisms promoting transparency, accountability, and participation, we can mitigate the effects of the iron law of oligarchy and create organizations representative of their members. Moreover, fostering a culture of continuous learning and improvement within an organization can help achieve this goal, which in turn can lead to organizations that are more resilient, adaptable, and responsive to their needs. One potential strategy for achieving this involves cultivating a culture of continuous learning and improvement. This might involve regular reporting and evaluation mechanisms, as well as opportunities for members to provide feedback and input on key decisions. By promoting shared ownership and responsibility among all stakeholders, we can create organizations that are more resilient, adaptable, and responsive to their needs. Furthermore, this approach can help organizations stay ahead of the curve in an ever-changing world, ultimately serving as a powerful reminder of the ongoing need for innovation and experimentation in our efforts to create more just and equitable societies. As we continue to explore Michels' theory, it's essential to recognize the implications of the iron law on our understanding of organizational dynamics, as well as its far-reaching consequences for how we approach collective action and social coordination. One potential response to this problem is to focus on creating decentralized or participatory structures where power is distributed among multiple stakeholders rather than concentrated at the top. This approach can foster shared ownership and responsibility, ultimately leading to organizations that are more resilient, adaptable, and responsive to their members' needs, a strategy that builds upon the idea of cultivating a culture of continuous learning and improvement. However, it's crucial to acknowledge that this approach isn't without its challenges. Decentralized decision-making processes can be messy and inefficient due to competing interests or priorities among stakeholders. The lack of a clear hierarchy or central authority can lead to confusion and paralysis, particularly in situations where swift action is required. Nevertheless, it's tempting to conclude that the iron law is an insurmountable obstacle. However, by acknowledging its implications and developing strategies to mitigate its effects, we can work towards creating more just and equitable societies, a goal that requires us to continue exploring Michels' theory and its far-reaching consequences. However, this would be to underestimate the power of human creativity and innovation. By implementing mechanisms that promote transparency, accountability, and participation, we can build organizations that are truly democratic, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive and participatory. To overcome these challenges, it requires a willingness to experiment with new forms of governance and coordination, as well as a commitment to ongoing learning and adaptation. Moreover, it necessitates a deep understanding of the underlying social dynamics at play, including how power and influence are exercised within organizations. This understanding is crucial for navigating complexities that arise when there's no clear hierarchy or central authority. The lack of a clear hierarchy or central authority can lead to confusion and paralysis, particularly in situations where swift action is required. Ultimately, this underscores the ongoing need for innovation and experimentation in our efforts to create more just and equitable societies. Furthermore, acknowledging this tension between democracy and organization can help us build organizations that truly embody democratic principles. By recognizing the tension between democracy and organization, we can build organizations that embody democratic principles, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive and participatory. As we delve deeper into Michels' theory, it's essential to recognize that the iron law of oligarchy has profound implications for our understanding of organizational dynamics. Moreover, this concentration of power at the top can have far-reaching consequences for the organization as a whole, shaping its culture, values, and effectiveness. One of the most significant effects is the stifling of dissenting voices and innovative ideas. When decision-making becomes more centralized, those at the periphery may feel discouraged from sharing their perspectives or proposing alternative solutions, leading to a lack of creativity, stagnation, and decline over time. This can result in the suppression of minority views, perpetuating an environment of conformity rather than constructive debate. In addition, the iron law of oligarchy underscores the need for organizations to respond quickly and effectively to changing circumstances. As environments change and new challenges emerge, it is crucial that organizations adapt and evolve. However, when power is concentrated at the top, decision-making processes can become slow and rigid, making adaptation difficult. This concentration of power can also lead to a lack of diversity in perspectives and ideas. The concentration of power at the top can have far-reaching consequences for an organization's ability to respond effectively to changing circumstances. When a small group has the final say in decision-making, it can lead to a lack of diversity in perspectives and ideas, resulting in organizational myopia where the organization is unable to see beyond its own interests or adapt to new challenges. This, in turn, can have negative consequences for decision-making and innovation. Moreover, when power is concentrated at the top, leaders may become increasingly isolated from the rest of the organization, which can have negative consequences for decision-making and innovation. Additionally, there is often a tendency for leaders to surround themselves with individuals who prioritize pleasing their leader over providing constructive criticism or challenging the status quo. This can ultimately stifle new ideas by fear. In addition, this concentration of power can also lead to a lack of accountability and transparency within the organization. Despite these challenges, it's essential to recognize that the iron law of oligarchy doesn't necessarily mean organizations must succumb to power concentration at the top. Rather, it highlights the need for ongoing efforts to promote democracy and participation within organizations, which can involve decentralizing decision-making authority, creating opportunities for diverse perspectives and voices to be heard, a crucial step in fostering truly democratic organizations. This requires a deliberate effort to distribute power widely and encourage inclusive decision-making. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder that the struggle for democratic values is an ongoing process of organizational design and development. By acknowledging this tension between democracy and organization, we can work to build organizations where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive, a goal that requires careful consideration of Michels' research on Italian socialist parties in the early 20th century, which underscores the importance of balancing democratic values with organizational realities. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to recognize that this concentration of power is not a product of individual personalities or character traits, but rather an inherent feature of large-scale organizations attempting to coordinate collective action. Michels' research provides compelling evidence for this law, which highlights the need to move beyond simplistic solutions and instead adopt a more nuanced approach that takes into account the inherent challenges of organizational design. In fact, Michels' own observations suggest that when organizations emphasize their commitment to democracy, they may inadvertently create conditions conducive to oligarchic tendencies. This occurs because creating a shared sense of purpose and collective identity can lead to power concentration in the hands of those best equipped to articulate and mobilize this vision, which raises important questions about how we might design organizations that are truly democratic. One strategy involves decentralizing decision-making authority, allowing for greater autonomy and self-organization at the local level. Another approach involves creating opportunities for diverse perspectives and voices to be heard through formal mechanisms like representative councils or informal networks of communication. By implementing these strategies, organizations can mitigate the effects of oligarchy and foster a more inclusive environment, ultimately enabling them to better achieve their democratic goals. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder that the struggle for democratic values is not just a matter of individual character or leadership style, but rather an ongoing process of organizational design and development. This realization underscores the tension between democracy and organization, which we can work to address by building organizations that are truly democratic. Michels' research on Italian socialist parties reveals that even organizations committed to democratic values and egalitarian principles cannot escape the gravitational pull of oligarchy. Despite their efforts to promote participation and inclusivity, these organizations inevitably succumb to power concentration in the hands of a few key individuals or groups, a natural consequence of organizational dynamics. This is not to say leaders are inherently corrupt or power-hungry, rather, they have developed skills and expertise necessary for navigating organizational complexities. The implications of the iron law of oligarchy extend far beyond political organizations, encompassing all social and economic institutions. Moreover, this phenomenon's consequences affect not only large-scale coordination efforts but also smaller-scale endeavors. Whether a corporation seeks to maximize profits, a non-profit organization strives to achieve its mission, or a community group works towards a common goal, the tendency towards oligarchy is an inherent feature of large-scale coordination. As we delve deeper into the implications of the iron law of oligarchy, it becomes clear that this phenomenon has significant consequences for all social and economic institutions. Moreover, the tendency toward oligarchy is an inherent feature of large-scale coordination efforts, regardless of organizational type or goal. In fact, this reality highlights the importance of grasping its far-reaching effects, which underscores the need to consider its implications thoroughly.